The National Desk, America's News, now.
Coming up on the National Desk, America's News now. Crisis in Haiti, the country's collapse raising concerns the violent uprising could reach U.S. shores.
Many of my peers have been targeted based off what they're wearing.
Alarming trend, high-end clothing is being stolen from students. What trendy brands are singled out, how the community is coming together to keep children safe. And carjacking crisis. Teens steal a car and lead police on a dangerous chase. See how officers are finally able to catch them. From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we will get to those stories in just a bit. But first, a judge ruled Fulton County DA Fani Willis must remove herself or Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade, whom she had a romantic relationship with, from the election interference case against Trump. They admitted to a romantic relationship in 2022 and 2023, but denied any wrongdoing. Friday, we learned Wade withdrew from the Trump election case. Meantime, the race for the White House is on this weekend. Trump appearing at a rally in Ohio and is gaining ground on President Biden in swing states. A new Fox News poll has Trump leading Biden in Pennsylvania by 2 points, 49 to 47%. And in Arizona, Trump is up 49 to 45%, or 4 points. New developments now in Israel's war to destroy Hamas terrorists and talks of a possible deal for Hamas to release more Israeli hostages. The negotiated deal would lead to a 6-week ceasefire in Gaza and include the release of 40 Israeli hostages. However, Israeli officials say Hamas continues with demands, asking for the release of 400 Palestinian prisoners, including dozens who killed Israelis. Israeli officials also outraged after Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called for a new Israeli leader to replace Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has lost his way by allowing his political survival to take the precedence over the best interests of Israel. At this critical juncture, I believe a new election is the only way to allow for a healthy and open decision-making process about the future of Israel.
It is grotesque and hypocritical for Americans who hyperventilate about foreign interference in our own democracy to call for the removal of a democratically elected leader of Israel.
This is not only highly inappropriate, it's just plain wrong. For an American leader to play such a divisive role in Israeli politics while our closest ally in the region is in an existential battle for its very survival.
And Israeli War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz wrote, Israel is a robust democracy and only its citizens will decide its future and leadership. Any external interference on the matter is counterproductive and unacceptable. Right now, it's not clear when the Senate could vote on a bill that would force TikTok to separate from China's government. Senator Schumer only said the chamber will review the legislation. The bill passed overwhelmingly in the House and now appears to have broad support in the Senate.
You had TikTok sending out push notices to the phones of millions of its users, asking them to press a button to call its congressman. What do you think would happen if, say, Donald Trump next year tried to impose tariffs on China, or there's tension or even conflict over Taiwan? Of course, TikTok is a tool of Chinese communist propaganda. And as you said, China would never allow a pro-American news source in its country. It doesn't allow social media companies from this country there. We shouldn't allow TikTok to be owned by a Chinese company that is dominated by Chinese communist influence here.
Lawmakers and tech experts are poring over the bill's language. Chaos still unfolding in Haiti, with criminal gang groups controlling the capital city. In the U.S., that's leading to concerns the unrest could add to struggles at our own borders. The National Desk, Christine Frizzell reports.
On the ground in Haiti, the gangs remain in charge. The unrest on the streets there bringing new fears here of a mass migration event.
As a Florida man, I'm deeply concerned about this wave of people that we are having coming from Haiti, and it will accelerate.
We are ready if we need to deal with a mass migration. We did a full walkthrough of our contingency plan on Gitmo last summer.
Gitmo, or Guantanamo Bay, is just about 200 miles from Haiti, and also part of a new plan by the Biden administration to process Haitian migrants should there be a mass exodus, which so far there is no evidence of. But in 2021, following the assassination of Haiti's president, about 15,000 migrants fled to the southern border, setting up camp for days in Del Rio, Texas. Border security since that time becoming an even greater issue, with record numbers of migrants coming to the United States from all across the globe.
Good morning.
Now, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has directed emergency services to deploy more than 250 officers and soldiers and more than a dozen air and sea craft to the southern coast of Florida, with law enforcement in his state expressing concerns.
We're very vulnerable here on the Treasure Coast. We don't have enough federal resources on the water. They do the best they can. We know from experience they will run, they will hide, and we will have a complex law enforcement issue.
Especially since it's turtle nesting season, which means people who live along the beach are asked to keep the lights turned off. The latest estimates show more than 350,000 people have been internally displaced in Haiti, with authorities at the border it shares with the Dominican Republic reportedly sending back hundreds of undocumented Haitians every day, a sign to them they will not be welcomed no matter how much the situation deteriorates. In Washington, I'm Christine Frizzau.
Police shortages also leaving entire areas of Pittsburgh without any officers during certain times. Pittsburgh police said they've been forced to cut some staff between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m., meaning officers will not respond in person to calls that are not considered in-progress emergencies. Instead, calls will go to a recording. Right now, just 22 officers will be available to cover all of Pittsburgh at night. In Washington, new efforts to recruit officers for the Seattle Police Department. The department's struggling with staffing at its lowest level since the 90s, and a $30,000 bonus is still not enough to attract officers.
Well, I believe this money is coming from cost savings from not being able to hire enough officers in the past and repurposing this money for incentives so that we can be competitive with other departments.
Seattle officials say a new labor deal could help attract more officers. The Seattle Police Department has not had a labor deal in 4 years. Maryland authorities warning thieves are now targeting teens for certain brands of clothing, with dozens of reports of clothes being stolen at schools. The National Desk Brad Bell reports.
It often happens suddenly, as it did in this caught-on-camera robbery in the district. People in that car pointing a gun at a college student on a bicycle, taking their high-end winter coat. Now it's happening to high school students in Prince George's County, like the 14-year-old shot in Hyattsville in January as he fought to keep his coat. Flowers high school students now being warned by their principal not to wear the trendy brands like Canada Goose and Moose Knuckle jackets and Balenciaga sneakers. Students we speak to angered by the crime trend.
Many of my peers have been targeted based off what they're wearing.
It's like, why you gotta take for somebody else just so you can have it? You feel me? It's like, if you want it, work to go get it.
It's gotten so bad that community associations near Flowers High are fighting back with their eyes and ears, organizing along with County Council Chair Jolene Ivey what they're calling the Community Power Hour.
Just did something to the gut of her stomach to hear that when our students are walking home from school, people are strong-arming them.
Ivey handing out flyers along with Flowers principal Gorman Brown.
If you could just be outside, visible, keep your eyes out.
Hoping an alert community will protect the students.
People out there, they do not care about us, okay? They don't care about being civilized. They don't care about making their own money and buying things. They care about the easy, quick way of robbing people.
Students head home on buses, on foot, or in cars. Student Sydney Hassan says the community watch will provide some comfort.
It makes it feel like there's a community watching out for us.
And while this effort is focusing on this high school community in this particular neighborhood, the organizers say there is no reason why this can't be picked up region-wide to keep many more children safe. In Springdale, Brad Bell.
A Nevada deputy district attorney raising concerns over a policy she says allows Child and Family Services to release convicted juveniles immediately on parole. According to state law, juvenile correctional facilities must accept a minor unless there is not enough room, there is not enough money, or if the facility superintendent does not find the child suitable for admission.
Well, the solution isn't to release some of our most serious offenders back into the community where they just offended, or to shorten the length of time that a juvenile stays in correctional facility because there aren't enough beds. To release a juvenile to the street is doing nothing but a disservice, not just to the juvenile, but to the community.
And Clark reports there were only 152 beds total across Nevada's 3 correctional facilities at the beginning of the month. While dashcam video has been shared of a police chase, officers pursued a car stolen by 3 teens. The National Desk Hannah Knowles reports from Seattle.
3 teens involved, a 16-year-old and 2 14-year-olds. They tried to carjack multiple victims in the Alpine neighborhood, even threatening them with a gun. They then took off in a stolen vehicle.
Dashcam video from the night of December 19th shows a Seattle police officer chase after a stolen gray vehicle. After 3 attempted carjackings in the Alpine neighborhood of West Seattle, officers navigate traffic trying to stop the car. The chase then heads eastbound on the West Seattle Bridge. Officers quickly deploy spike strips, deflating the tires of the stolen car, but then the vehicle continues south on I-5, exiting the highway to the Georgetown neighborhood. You see the 3 teens jump out of the car and run from police. Officers chase 2 of the teens and handcuff them.
Lay down, flat.
The 3rd teen found shortly after and taken into custody.
All 3 teens were booked into juvenile detention on a slew of different charges, including robbery and possession of a stolen vehicle. The 16-year-old and one of the 14-year-old are out of custody on home electronic monitoring. The other 14-year-old remains in custody. In Seattle, Hannah Knowles.
In Minneapolis, rideshare giants Uber and Lyft pulling its businesses out of the city after lawmakers voted to increase pay for rideshare drivers to $15.57 an hour. Uber and Lyft say the city council's decision will put thousands of drivers out of work and leave passengers stranded. Both companies plan to stop service in the Twin Cities when the ordinance goes into effect May 1st. GOP lawmakers pushing back against a new proposal to reduce the work week to 4 days with no loss of pay. The bill, introduced by Senator Bernie Sanders, would also lower the threshold required for overtime pay to 32 hours. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy pushing back against the measure, saying, quote, there is no free lunch. He also added that such a mandate would hurt workers and crush small businesses. Straight ahead on the National Desk, budget backlash. Economists blasting President Biden's fiscal plan as a roadmap to accelerate America's decline unless Congress reels in Democrat spending. President Biden's new budget proposal includes the largest tax hike in American history at nearly $5 trillion. The executive vice president of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold, spoke about the plan with Jan Jeffcoat.
Biden's new budget proposal includes $4.9 trillion in tax hikes over the next 10 years. So after hitting a record high national debt of $34 trillion this year, Brandon, what impact would this budget now have on the national deficit?
Well, it would have a big impact, and you'd think that if you're raising taxes by nearly $5 trillion, you'd really be chipping away at that national deficit. Unfortunately, if you compare Biden's numbers to the numbers of the Congressional Budget Office, under the Congressional Budget Office current policy baseline, that means what is going to happen under current law, the deficit would be significantly smaller than what Biden is projecting here. And that is because not only is he taxing us, by nearly $5 trillion. He's also creating massive new spending programs. He's expanding the government in ways that we haven't seen in decades and decades. And I think that's a real problem. Now, this is a visionary document. It's not necessarily going to go into law, but it's a real warning sign for people that think this budget needs attention and we need to move in a different direction.
Certainly a roadmap that he's trying to lay out right here. He claims also this is only going to target the wealthy and corporations, which economists are saying that's not true. He is proposing to raise the corporate tax right now from 21 to 28%. But talk about how that will inevitably affect lower and middle class families.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't extract $5 trillion from the economy and not impact people up and down the economic ladder. We would have a corporate tax rate that would be effectively the highest in the industrialized world, higher than that of even France. So when you have a tax rate that high, what you end up seeing is corporations and, more importantly, jobs leaving the country, going abroad. Companies that do stay end up raising their prices, so we see more inflationary pressure, and they end up reducing wages. So average Americans, working Americans, see less in the way of a paycheck. That is hugely problematic in any economy, but particularly given the high inflation that we're experiencing currently.
Yeah, and as you said, you would think these tax hikes would be reducing the deficit, but the Congressional Budget Office found the opposite to be true. And there's also some misplaced priorities. The budget increases IRS funding by $100 billion. What? What's that about?
This is so ridiculous. You know, we saw this huge $80 billion boost just a couple years ago in Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. Everybody hated it. Everybody was terrified. And not only are they plussing up the budget by even more for the IRS, they're actually repealing some important taxpayer protections that ensure that people are not unfairly assessed with tax penalties, a supervisory sign-off that is required before tax penalties can be assessed. This is such bad policy, it's not even funny. So yeah, another incredibly misplaced priority here in this budget.
You can view the full interview, plus more top stories online all the time at thenationaldesk.com. The president just submitted his budget for fiscal year 2025 to Congress. I'm back with Connor from the Fact Check team. And Connor, what role does the president's budget proposal actually play in our actual budget?
Well, Dee Dee, it's really nothing more than a policy tool used to express the president's goals. So the Constitution gives Congress the authority to tax and create a budget. So the president doesn't have an express constitutional role in the process. But in 1921, Congress created a statutory requirement for the president to submit a proposed budget every year. These are just a set of recommendations, though, that Congress is not required to adopt.
Okay, so the president submitted his proposal. What happens next?
The proposal now goes to Congress, where it will be the starting point for a lot of negotiations. Now, look at this table. There's a lot of steps. The next big one is for Congress to create their own spending plan called a budget resolution, which they then use to pass a series of separate funding bills that actually fund the government. The deadline for this is October 1st. But Congress hasn't even passed all of last year's spending bills, which is why there's still potential for a government shutdown on March 22nd. According to Pew Research, this is interesting, in nearly 5 decades, Congress has only passed all of its required spending measures just 4 times.
Well, that is good perspective.
Yeah,
Thank you, Connor,
definitely.
for that. For more on this topic, including links to the Fact Check team sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. Up next, helping the homeless find out a city's plan for providing shelter to their homeless population. The National Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start with more than a dozen arrests in connection with a prostitution ring in Ohio.
Don't try to buy sex in Ohio.
A simple message from the Fairfield County Sheriff after a complicated sting operation. These 17 people busted for paying for sex.
Because we use the frequently visited websites where these type ads go up. We create an ad, we put it up, and they respond to it. Initially, when we first started doing this, I was kind of shocked to see the professions of some of the folks that are responding to these ads.
For example, this time they arrested a pediatric dentist, 56-year-old Ronald Griffin, and this man, 60-year-old Rui Bruce, who the sheriff says works as a professor for Columbus State. On the college's website, he's listed as faculty under physical sciences.
This particular activity is a piece or part of a broader crime organization.
Not everybody who is chronically homeless is ready for housing. There are intermediary steps that individuals need.
It's not one size fits all for homelessness in Portland. On Monday, Mayor Ted Wheeler and Multnomah County Board Chair Jessica Vega Peterson presented a united front to deal with this crisis.
This is a leap of faith, but it's one that we're going to be taking together.
The framework for the Homelessness Response Action Plan details their plan to cut back on people living on sidewalks across the city.
It's heartbreaking, devastating, and all too common.
The plan includes getting 2,699 people into shelter or housing by December 31st, 2025, adding 1,000 shelter beds in the next 2 years, adding hundreds more behavioral health beds, and opening a drop-off sobering center.
As police rushed to Issaquah High School, students tried to make sense of the lockdown that brought activities to a standstill across the campus.
I show up to school right before second period. I'm walking in, my friend's like, there's a lockdown. None of us are getting in.
Those who were already in class heard the principal announce over the public address system for students to stay put. Then they turned to social media for answers.
As I was just sitting there on my phone, I was getting rumors about teachers or people getting like stabbed or shot or tackled, or I heard that there was like blood stains all over the gym.
Those rumors were false, but a lot of students didn't know the difference. Police say two brothers got into a fistfight with each other, and when a school staff member stepped in to de-escalate the situation, that campus employee was also inadvertently assaulted.
I think they need to inform us more because I had no idea what was going on. People told me there was a knife. I was pretty scared this morning.
Up next here on the National Desk, drop in drivers. Fewer teens are getting a driver's license. What's driving down the numbers across the country? High costs are playing a role in a growing number of teens skipping out on getting their driver's license. There has been a big drop since 2022, and some experts expect it to get worse. The National Desk, Jake Taylor reports.
Far fewer teens are counting down the days till their 16th birthday when they can race to the DMV for their driving test.
That are kind of outside of that high school age group.
Longtime driving instructor Brian Moss got his license 40 years ago.
Spending hours and hours to try to get every detail figured out so that I could get the license as early as possible.
But not anymore.
We can access anything on our phone, and I think before you needed a car to have those freedoms.
Across the country and in Utah as well, fewer kids are getting a license. Numbers from the census and NTSB show about 20 years ago, more than 2 in 3 16-year-olds in Utah had their license. Now, it's less than half.
Students do hold them.
Elena Delgado turns 18 next month, but doesn't have her license.
It would serve no purpose to me.
Teens telling me a license has lost its allure when freedom and friendship is found on their phone.
We can do anything on our phone. Like, instead of having to go out to get food, just Uber Eat it. If you need a ride, just call an Uber.
There's just not that need, so you can accomplish much of what we needed a car to get to 30 years ago without having to go anywhere.
Add to that the ever-increasing costs of buying a car, paying for gas, and the shocking price of insuring a teenage driver.
Because I have no access to resources to have a car. Why have a driver's license when I don't have a car to drive?
And when you do need to get somewhere, a smartphone makes it easy for teens to call mom and dad for a ride or coordinate with friends.
There are quite a few of my friends that don't have the need to get their license in terms of that they do have parents that are available.
This change isn't necessarily easy on mom or dad. Now it's often parents tired of personally driving kids around town who are desperate to get their kids behind the wheel.
Where now a lot of times it's the parents that we're calling and saying, I got to get this kid his license. I can't keep driving him around and being his chauffeur.
Coming up next here on the National Desk, the latest on migrant-related crimes and how lawmakers are trying to curb the threats. You are watching the National Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
Now on the National Desk, a surge expected. The warmer weather along the southern border has authorities preparing for a rise in undocumented immigrants trying to cross. Plus,
it's just as good as a regular Raisin Bran, but it's a little cheaper in price.
Because it's getting so hard you can't eat. Make you want to grow your own food.
priced out, Americans trying to spend less with red-hot inflation, taking a bigger bite out of our dollar. And squatters' rights. The Fact Check team dives into the history of squatting and the challenges of evicting people from abandoned properties. From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. We are glad you're with us. I'm Didi Gatton, and we begin with the border crisis and more reports of undocumented immigrants charged with violent crimes in the U.S. In Texas, the Department of Public Safety posted this video of troopers arresting migrants on a private ranch in Webb County. At least one suspect is a member of a Mexican drug cartel who now faces human smuggling charges. In Florida, the Palm Beach County Sheriff says there has been, quote, an enormous spike in sex crimes against juveniles in the undocumented migrant communities. 3 migrants from Guatemala were arrested, accused of abducting a woman, forcing her into a car and sexually assaulting her. In Texas, crossings dramatically decreased in the new year after Governor Greg Abbott took control of major hotspots. But the Texas Public Policy Foundation says crossings are expected to pick back up in the spring.
So we're already starting to see that surge up again here in Texas. What you're going to see is that as the numbers start to increase again in Texas, they're just going to go to the left and right of where the state has established its security. I think this trend is just going to continue where we're just going to continue to bust out the seams.
Officials are preparing for an influx of migrants from Venezuela and Haiti because of the rise of gang violence and chaos in those regions. Critics of President Biden's border policy is still blasting his State of the Union address. Jan Jeffcoat spoke with former acting commissioner of Customs and Border Protection and fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Mark Morgan.
So the president's still blaming Congress for the border crisis, saying he needs lawmakers to pass this legislation, yet fails to mention the, 94 executive orders he issued when he first started to reverse any previous border security policies. What did you make of this?
Yeah, Jan, look, I think this is one of many areas why I'm so frustrated because I know our president right now is simply not being honest with American people. Look, I learned a long time ago that the intentional omission of a material fact is the same thing as a lie. And that's what we're talking about right now. In his first few months in office, he issued, as you said, 94 executive orders, the stroke of his pen, that dismantled and destroyed the network of tools, authorities, and policies we had in place that had led to the most secure border in our lifetime. And I know because I was there. And for the past 3 years, he has denied the chaos and lawlessness of the border. And as we're entering the final throes of an election year, all of a sudden he admits a crisis and he's saying that he needs Congress to act, and it's just not true. I'll give you a couple examples. He ended the asylum and cooperative agreements on day one. He ended the Remain in Mexico program. He reinstated catch and release. He stopped constructing the wall. All of those things led to the most secure border in our lifetime. He could take that same pen and reinstate all those actions. And Jan, I promise you, you would see a dramatic reduction in the chaos and lawlessness at our borders if he used his authority.
And Mark, he keeps mentioning this bipartisan border security bill that failed because, as you've said, it had nothing that would actually have addressed the migrant crisis we're seeing. However, there's another border bill that did pass the House, the Senate refusing to take it up. Talk about the differences in both of those bills.
Yeah, Jan, look, this is why I love coming on with you, because you really get to the heart of the issue. And this is another area I'm so frustrated because the president and this White House is just not being honest with American people. The Senate bill, it was not a meaningful border security bill on a couple of reasons. One, let's think about this. First of all, it gave $60 billion to Ukraine, but when it came to our own border, it only earmarked $20 billion to secure our own border. But $7 billion of that, Jan, went to actually NGOs, non-governmental organization, and sanctuary cities. By the way, the same sanctuary cities policies that led to the death of Lake and Riley, by the way, which is important. But also, again, it did not address what was needed to actually secure our border. And one of the big things is it didn't end catch and release. Any bill that doesn't end catch and release is not a serious, meaningful border security bill. H.R. 2 is. H.R. 2 was passed by the House 10 months ago. It actually, not only did it give resources, but more importantly, it provided the policy pathway to actually secure the border. And one thing of many that it did is it actually ended catch and release. It went over to the Senate side. Chuck Schumer has sat on it for 10 months, refused to put it forward for a vote. So this lie that Republicans want the border issue for a campaign issue in 2024 is just not true. If that's the case, why would they have passed H.R. 2 10 months ago?
And you can view the full interview plus more top stories online all the time at thenationaldesk.com. Turning to your money and a new warning for the American economy from overseas. German sportswear company Adidas reported its first loss in more than 30 years and expects revenue to keep dropping well into this year. Overall, the company said sales were down 6% in North America last year. Meantime, nearly 1,000 discount stores across the country set to close. Family Dollar said this year it will shut down at least 600 locations after missing its holiday earning estimates. The company said its decision also came from shoppers shifting to online platforms and uncertainty in the economy. Right now, food does remain one of the biggest expenses for families, and new inflation data shows grocery prices up more than 2% over the past year. The National Desk, Kara Duffy, talked to some Florida shoppers about the numbers and how they're adding up.
You keep hearing inflation is slowing down, but high food prices taking a bite out of all of our budgets.
Because it's getting so hard you can't eat. Make you want to grow your own food so that you can have fresh vegetables.
Like all of us, Helen Taylor is just looking for new ways to fill the pantry without emptying her pockets.
Strawberries Only $1.99. You go somewhere else, still more. So
Helen says shopping at Aldi has been a big help on a fixed income.
And I only spend like $40-something.
Wow.
You know, we just bought Raisin Bran, or a knockoff Raisin Bran. That's just as good as a regular Raisin Bran, but it's a little cheaper in price.
Jim Callahar is doing whatever he can to save. For him, writing out a shopping list helps too.
So as we're making our list, we write Aldi next to it or Costco next to it, so that we kind of tailor our shopping to what those stores have.
Another tip, map out your meals for the week based on ingredients that are on sale, especially meat, which has gotten so pricey.
The coupons are a blessing and a help.
And that was Kara Duffy reporting. Outrage growing over a new California law mandating utilities charge customers based on their income instead of their electricity use. The new rate structure requires households earning between $28,000 and $69,000 to be charged an extra $20 to $34 a month. Households earning between $69,000 and $180,000 to pay an extra $51 to $73 a month, and those earning more than $180,000 to pay an extra $85 to $128 a month. Utilities statewide must comply with the new law by July 1st. The Department of Health and Human Services investigating Change Healthcare after it was hit with the most significant cyber attack on the U.S. healthcare system. The investigation will determine whether the insurance billing firm complied with federal law, which requires providers to protect patient data. The attack disrupted medical payments from insurance companies to providers, leaving some clinics strapped for cash. The European Union now leads the world in artificial intelligence regulation. It passed a sweeping law intended to ensure responsible use and development of AI. Here in the U.S., members of Congress also want to get something done. The National Desk, Atra El-Nashar reports.
The EU trying to get ahead of AI.
The future is AI-fueled, and we must continue to shape it.
The AI Act, the European Union's first set of binding regulations on artificial intelligence, will be enacted later this year. It's an effort 5 years in the making to manage dangers of the rapidly evolving technology.
A ban on social scoring, discriminatory algorithms, and manipulative techniques. And this ensures AI serves humanity and not the other way around.
At the same time, the EU hopes the law fosters innovation, nearly identical goals shared by leaders in the U.S.
I'm determined to do everything in my power to promote and demand responsible innovation.
The president's executive actions include requirements for developers to conduct safety tests and share results with the government, and expanded grants for AI research.
Here on Capitol Hill, members of both parties hope to see similar policy codified into law, but the legislative wheels are turning very slowly. Meanwhile, it seems just about every week we're learning about a new way that AI can be misused or weaponized, especially in an election year.
Voting this Tuesday only enables the Republicans in their quest to elect Donald Trump again.
This AI-generated robocall depicting President Biden telling voters in New Hampshire to skip the state's primary. And this AI-generated photo of former President Trump circulating online, posted by Newsmax host and Trump supporter Mark Kaye. Meanwhile, Google apologizing for photos generated by its Gemini feature portraying Black Nazis, Native American Vikings, racially diverse founding fathers. And Adobe cautioning users its generative AI features are currently in beta, and results may occasionally be misleading, incorrect, or biased. The exact thing tech experts and officials say, for the sake of the public, should not go unchecked. On Capitol Hill, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
A real estate deal gone wrong has captured national attention. A New York couple purchased a $2 million home, only to discover the previous owner's caretaker claimed he still had a license to live there. I'm with Connor from the Fact Check team. And Connor, this has all sparked a discussion about squatters' rights. Why do they exist?
Dee Dee, there's a lot to unpack here. So the concept of what we know as squatters' rights were brought over a long time ago from British property law and were created to make sure abandoned property could be used and to protect occupants from being kicked out without proper notice.
All right, and how does a person get these rights?
It's a good question. So each state has different laws on this, but in most areas, you have some form of squatters' rights if you stay at a property for more than 30 days with permission. And if you remain long enough, this is crazy, you can actually take ownership of the property through what's called adverse possession. But that is really hard to prove because there's a lot of legal conditions, and it typically takes 10 to 20 years.
All right, and why are squatters so hard to get rid of?
Well, because if they meet that state criteria, then they're viewed as tenants in the eyes of the law. So a landlord will have to follow state procedure to properly evict that person. If they still don't leave, then it becomes a court battle.
All right, Connor, thank you. For more on this Fact Check Team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com. So to come on the National Desk, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, including the possibility of another option for voters in the 2024 presidential race.
And welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, reporting on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. Our team of correspondents is here to share their insights on the stories they've been covering. Could TikTok be banned in the U.S.? Congress is taking steps toward that outcome. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar explained what's happening and what the chances are of TikTok disappearing from Americans' phones.
Right. So the concern here, Steve, is that according to lawmakers on the Hill, TikTok poses a national security threat because its parent company, ByteDance, is based in Beijing. And under Chinese law, companies have to comply with the Communist Party's operations. Basically, lawmakers are fearful that the Chinese Communist Party can access American user data from TikTok and use it to undermine American interests, meddle in elections, for instance. So the House moved with remarkable speed on a piece of legislation that would force a sale of TikTok. So basically, ByteDance would have to spin it off, or it's banned in the United States. And ByteDance does not want to sell. And China could block a sale of TikTok's algorithm if they wanted to. So basically, it's a de facto ban. So there was a lot of momentum in the House. It passed with over 350 votes, something you certainly don't see, especially not in an election year, a week after a bill was introduced. So now all eyes turn to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. If he's going to bring this up for a vote, if he's going to wait and let the momentum die off, if he's going to refer it to committee, because you'd be hard pressed to find a senator who doesn't think TikTok has some national security threat one way or another. But this is a very politically volatile issue. No one wants to upset young voters who love TikTok, people of any age who love TikTok. There's about 170 million of them in the United States. Some also have some constitutional concerns about free speech and whatnot. But the president says he would sign this if it got to his desk. But that's a very big if.
And just like everything in Washington and politics, it's never just black and white, always way more complicated than it seems on the surface. But in another development in the tech world, you've been following new AI regulations in Europe. What do they do, and will this be a blueprint for AI around the world?
Yeah, so the European Union's parliament gave a final stamp of approval on this sweeping new piece of legislation that applies to its dozens of members that really has two goals: mitigate the dangers of AI, but also foster innovation. Those are the same goals that Congress has. It's a bipartisan concern, a lot like the TikTok issue. It's just a matter of how to address it and how to codify those goals into law. So President Biden has rolled out some executive actions that, require transparency with safety testing, expanding grants for AI research in the federal government and things like that. But nothing has been set in stone, no real legislation's been passed. Now, Europe took this huge step, but it took them 5 years. Just speaking of TikTok, that's been a concern for years too, and it's taken this long for something to sort of happen. So AI is developing so quickly, Congress doesn't move with the same amount of speed. And every week it seems like we are learning about a new way that AI can be manipulated or weaponized. And especially in an election year, that's really concerning. So Europe took this huge step. Doesn't look like the U.S. will follow anytime soon, but you're right. They
pretty much have the same goals.
And so short answer is don't hold your breath for Congress to do anything anytime soon on this one. Meanwhile, Joe Biden and Donald Trump clinched their respective parties' presidential nominations this past week, but national correspondent Christine Frizzau, there's been a lot of chatter about other possible choices on the ballot this November.
Yeah, it's so interesting, Steve. Forget months. It's now been a couple years that we've heard from U.S. voters that Donald Trump and Joe Biden is the rematch they did not want. And yet here we are pretty early in this election cycle, and both have clinched their party's nomination. But poll after poll shows us that there may be some room for someone else to get in here. So I'll just give you an example. A recent ABC News Ipsos poll found when, people were asked who would do the best job as president, 36% said Trump, 33% said Biden, and 30% said neither. So that's pretty much, a third of voters who are willing to maybe consider someone else. So what do we have? We have this group No Labels, which has continued to say they're going to put someone else forward. They're meeting seriously about it, and we may hear in a matter of days who they're thinking about. We also have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. This is somebody who hasn't gotten that much press coverage, but in fairness, has been polling in double digits, higher even than Nikki Haley was in a lot of the time. So he has a message. He represents something different. Some experts say he represents just simply a protest vote. And he is now going to announce his vice presidential pick. He's got to do that in order to get on the ballot in some of the states here. And he's hinted that he's considering Jesse the Body Ventura, the former governor of Minnesota, but also quarterback for the Jets, Aaron Rodgers. So this is going to be really interesting to see how this plays out and how, if at all, he plays a role in this upcoming election. Some political experts say, right now people are willing to consider someone else, but when it comes down to it, in November, if this is a close election, as it looks like it's going to be, people will choose their respective camps.
Right, and that seems to be the case every 4 years. It's been over 30 years since a third party has had any significant impact in the overall vote. But as you pointed out, it's a different time now, and these are different candidates, so we'll see how this all plays out over the rest of the year. Christine, Atra, thank you both, as always, for your hard work and your great reporting. Back to you.
Still ahead here on the National Desk, stopped and scammed. Alabama deputies warning drivers to stay vigilant after a woman was pulled over by a police impersonator. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. From dangerous commutes due to road flooding in Maine to a police officer impersonator pulling over drivers in Alabama. We're taking the pulse of America, but we start in West Virginia with a man arrested in connection with a $1 bank robbery.
Nicholas Reese Cole was still waiting in the lobby of the First Community Bank in Somersville when police responded to the holdup Wednesday. He had passed a cell phone with a demand note typed in it, warning he had a gun in his waistband, but only asking for $1 and asking the woman not to panic. It added he would wait in the lobby for the cops and not harm anyone. It said, "I am homeless, and this is my last resort."
So you told him you had a gun, but you didn't when you robbed the bank?
I didn't say anything. I showed him a phone.
The bank officials declined an interview request. Magistrate Wayne Plummer set a $50,000 bond for Cole, who has a place to sleep at the Central Regional Jail.
We always wonder if
it's going to collapse underneath you.
Angela Acorn drives a school bus down East Pond Road twice a day, and since flooding has reduced a portion of the road down to one lane, she says it's unsafe.
It's very hard coming this way to see what's coming. When I come through here in the morning and it's dark, I wish the flashes on the bus just to better visibility, but it's very hard, and sometimes you get going and somebody else is coming.
Noblesboro's fire chief says there was a car crash on East Pond Road Tuesday and says the fire department has tried to help, pumping out water as recently as January, but it's a state road, so any repairs have to be done by the Maine DOT.
This just isn't draining off. It's become a new pond, and I guess maybe that's why they called it East Pond Road.
A woman was on her way to work Tuesday morning when she says she was pulled over by a silver pickup truck along I-59 near the Trussville exit.
It had a K9 sticker on the back, and it kept weaving in and out of traffic.
She explains the truck was unmarked and the man was in plain clothing she described as golf attire.
He had on a hat that said Alabama State Trooper, like a ball cap.
She says he identified himself as an off-duty state trooper, but she wasn't sure why she was pulled over and was already skeptical.
He told me that he was going to take me to jail for reckless driving and speeding and have my Jeep towed, and he was going to arrest me.
Oxford Police Chief Bill Partridge says anytime something like this is reported, it raises concern.
People like this, they're either on a power trip, they're mentally unstable. Those type of people we don't need out there, especially trying to represent law enforcement. We're look diligently for those types of people.
And still ahead here on the National Desk, the numbers are in. Find out how much money Americans lost to scammers last year. The numbers are in, about $1.3 billion, the staggering amount Americans lost to impersonation scammers in 2023. The most common suspects impersonating a government employee or tech support, with seniors unfortunately accounting for over half the losses to tech support scams last year, new data says. Because of record-breaking profits made year over year, the FBI warns scammers likely won't slow down. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.